So, let's start with a little bit of background. I'm a male and I've been in college for a few years now. A group of people from my program would always go to this dive bar on our college's street every Thursday night. They did karaoke, so it was a fun way for all of us to blow off steam once a week. Unfortunately, as the school year went on, the bar got sketchier and sketchier. Weirdos started showing up. Creepy old guys hitting on very sober college girls, you get it. Until one day this group of guys started showing up. They weren't the cleanest, friendliest, or even soberest of people, frequently hitting on some of my friends and making everyone extremely uncomfortable. One time, one of the guys walked up to my friend and flat out asked her in the middle of our conversation if we wanted any cocaine. We of course politely declined. Anyway, now that some background is out of the way, on this particular night we decided to stay until last call. It's not unusual for us, but it also wasn't a regular thing. And I had heard some of the cocaine guys saying how they wanted some college you-know-what that night. Concerned for my friends who weren't dressed in the most PG of the group, I asked a couple of my boys to stick back with me to make sure that they got in their Uber safely. They of course agreed because they're bros and they were concerned as well. So we chilled at a table near the door and waited until they came out of the bathroom, half an hour after last call. By now it was about 2:30 in the morning, and we see to it that they called their Uber and get in it safely. Once they drive off, my buddies and I start walking back to our house. So it's just the three of us, me and my two friends, walking back at about 2:40 in the morning. We get about 5 minutes away from the bar when we hear the scuffing of shoes behind us. I turn around and see that one of these shorter guys was walking a little ways behind us quickly. It was late, I was tired, and I made nothing of it. Big mistake. 5 more minutes pass and I hear someone say, "Hey, wait up," from behind us. It's the same guy and he is a taller friend with him now. Immediately, I get this awful feeling in my gut. We ignore them and start walking faster, but the shorter of the two between my friend and me stops dead in front of me. Crap, I think to myself, and this is where I die. R.I.P. me, nice knowing you fellas. The bigger guy looks at us, almost sizing us up, and says, "You boys know that there's a tax for walking out here so late, right?" We all look at each other with a mix of annoyance and confusion. The little guy chimes in, 30 each, now. Now, with us being poor college students, we don't carry cash on us and we made that known. "Give us your wallets then," the big guy said. We lied through our teeth saying that we didn't have any of those either. So the big guy puts his hands on my buddy's shoulders and says, while pointing down to a very poorly lit street, "And then you don't mind if we pat you guys down over here, do ya? You're not carrying your wallet, so there's nothing to worry about, right?" "Of course I mind, you weirdo. Leave us alone." My buddy has the same idea because he shoved the guy's hands off his shoulders, saying, "Nope, you're not going to do that." And then the big guy out of nowhere grabs my buddy by the throat and punches him square in the jaw. My other buddy tackles the big guy off of him while the little guy jumps on his back. I'm standing there basically frozen and never having been in a fight before, let alone a mugging. My buddy realizes it and turns to me shouting, "Frickin' run!" So I start to sprint away, looking back and seeing my boys not too far behind. The big guy yells, "Hey, get back here!" But obviously we had no intention of returning to them, so we just sprinted, eventually losing them. My buddy called the cops and they meet us back at the residence. We give them our statements. I take the officers to the bar and where we had gotten attacked at, and they say that they'll let us know if they find them. One of our other friends, who just so happened to be up at the time, came and invited us up to his room for some celebratory whiskey, Because the only reason that we had stayed behind and gotten mugged in the first place because we wanted to protect our lady friends from those same guys. It's been a couple of months and I've heard nothing from the cops. But needless to say, we had to find a new hotspot for our Thursday night outings. Okay, let me start off by saying that I'm not a street smart person, or I wasn't back several years ago when this occurred. I've always been pretty naive and trusting, sadly, which has landed me in some pretty crappy situations, but this one was by far the scariest. So I had just recently gone through a really crappy, bitter, horrible breakup with my boyfriend, and I found myself living alone after he had packed his bags and left. I didn't really know many people in the area, and so I tended to turn to the internet to pass some time. Long story short, I started chatting to a guy, let's call him John, and we started hitting it off, and it turned out he lived really near me. And by really near me, I mean like probably a half an hour walk away. So we decided to meet up the next day and see how it went. I phoned my friend, let's call her Anne. Anne is infinitely wiser and more cynical than I, and I told her what the plan was. She insisted that she come with me as I didn't know this guy, and he could be an axe murderer, blah blah blah. So the next day, Anne and I met with John at around lunchtime in a local pub. It was midsummer, so we sat outside in the beer garden. It was pretty busy despite it being lunchtime, and this place was right next to a busy road, so there was nothing to really worry about, right? Well, we get some food and a beer, and we're all chatting and it's going pretty well. We're all hitting it off and having a laugh. We're taking turns to go to the bar to get around. I don't know if this is in terms outside of England, where one person buys for the whole group, and then later the next person goes and does the same, and so on and so on. So the day is turning into the afternoon, which is turning into the evening. The pub is filling up and we barely notice the time going by as we're having a good time. And we are filled with about 5 or 6 beers by this time, so we're getting pretty tipsy too. So John goes to the bar to get his round in, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up the next morning in my own bed, my face hurting and there is blood all over my sheets. I start freaking out at this point because I have literally no recollection of what the heck happened between 8 p.m. and waking up the next day. I don't know where the blood came from, and I don't know why I'm hurting. So tentatively, I get up and I take a look in the mirror. Now my face is an absolute mess. I look like I've been in a fight and I've lost badly. I have a black eye, a split lip. Half my face is just scraped and bruised. I felt sick. I was totally gobsmacked. What had happened? So I open my bedroom door and go to the bathroom when I see out of the corner of my eye, John laying naked on my sofa. Now at this point, I'm just losing my mind and I start yelling at him like crazy, demanding that he tell me what the heck was going on. He eventually calms me down and explains to me that I'd got out of my mind wasted the night before and I was embarrassing myself, slurring and stumbling all over the place. And eventually I fell over a picnic bench and hit my head pretty hard. Apparently I was bleeding and refusing help from anyone, so he called a cab and brought me home like the absolute knight in shiny armor that he was. I didn't remember any of this, not one single moment. I had a million questions, but at the same time I was utterly speechless. I know that I had had a few to drink, but it was no more than an average person would consume at a night out in the club, and I had had many of those. Was it possible that I had just that one too many? I mean, I guess so. What other explanation was there? I just looked at John with my mouth open, head absolutely pounding, and eventually I managed to muster, "I'm gonna be sick." So John looked after me that morning. He peppered the day with the odd tale of dumb things that I had done the night before, and how I must be so grateful because anything could have happened to me, and I never would have gotten back without him. I ate and got dressed, and by that afternoon, I was feeling better, so he said that he wanted to take me to his house and make me dinner, so that we could resume our date, from the point where I had ruined it by getting blackout drunk. So I said yeah, sure. It was nice of him to still want to hang out after everything. Like I said, I was so naive. I really didn't have much situational awareness at all. So we get to his house late in the afternoon, but when I say house, he lived in a static caravan, in a caravan park. I mean, it was nice enough inside, but I couldn't help but get a creepy vibe from it. It was tiny. The layout was, you open the front door into the living room, and then the further you went had the kitchen and the dining area. And then through a door into a tiny hall you have 2 small bedrooms and the small bathroom. And then after that there's a back door and the main bedroom. Now I'm sitting in the dining room while he's cooking and we're just generally making chit-chat. I'm feeling pretty awkward now because I can still remember absolutely nothing of the night before. So it feels a little like there's already been a power shift. Like he knows more about me than I'm aware of, and it's really uncomfortable. I decide that I would eat his food and then politely excuse myself back home. I didn't know what I was thinking coming here in the first place. I'm a pretty go-with-the-flow type person, but even I had started thinking, what am I even doing here? Just then he asked me how I'm feeling, and as I'm deep in thought, I don't even think about my reply. I feel like I've been drugged, I said distractedly. Well, at this point, he absolutely flips out. I mean, he absolutely goes insane, saying what I am accusing him of, and how I dare accuse him of things and I can't prove it, and that I'm just trying to cause all sorts of problems for him, and that he's on parole, so I'm basically sending him back to jail with my lies. I had no idea at all that he was on parole. He would later tell me in his insane rambling text messages that he had been arrested for a domestic assault. Great. He starts literally getting stuff off the kitchen sides and just smashing them, throwing plates against the wall, pulling the toaster out of the socket, and smashing that on the floor, just absolutely having a meltdown, while I'm sitting at his tiny caravan dining table like 5 feet away, just thinking, what the heck is even happening right now? I move to stand up and tell him that I think I'd better go when he suddenly lunges at me and shoves me as hard as he can, and I'm on my knees and he's laying blows into me telling me that I'm not going anywhere. He's between me and the front door at this point and I can't see an escape route, so I turn heel and just run through the corridor with him chasing just inches behind me. I dive in the nearest door and slam it shut and sit with my back to it so he can't get in. I'm in the tiny spare room and there's no windows that open. I'm trapped there. He's outside, pounding at the door and calling me every vile curse word in his vocabulary. I yell at him to go away and he stops banging. I hear him leave for a few minutes and then all of a sudden, 3 loud thumps. He's trying to break the door down. I'm absolutely terrified at this point and pushing with all my weight back against the door as if my life had depended on it, which I guess it did really. The thumping carries on for what seemed like forever. And then I guess they got tired or something and I heard him go into the living room and start shuffling around. I still stayed back against that door sobbing for at least another hour. Eventually, I heard the TV come on. He's actually sitting chilling watching some TV like nothing, while he's basically got a hostage cowering in his spare bedroom. I felt a flick of anger and adrenaline at this point, and I ever so slowly and quietly opened the door and peered out. The hall was in darkness and the door to the living room was shut. I'm alone, but I would have to walk past him to get to the front door. I'm desperately thinking of a way that I can get out when I remember the back door. I creep over to it as silently as I could and prayed that it was unlocked. It was. I silently thanked every single god I could think of and crept out, shutting the door silently behind me. I crept down the steps and just ran and ran, sobbing and delirious and so utterly confused. I had no idea where I was. It was pitch dark and I'd never been to this part of town before. I ran to the nearest payphone and used the change in my pocket to call my friend to come and pick me up. My bag and purse were still in John's caravan, along with some personal possessions that I had just abandoned. My friend drove me home and I sobbed the whole way. I never told him what had happened and he never asked. I just got home and went to bed and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I wake up and I find my phone that I've left at home. It has about 50 text messages on it, mostly from John, telling me that he's gonna bomb my house and kill my family, and that if he ever saw me in the street, he would take me out, and he would happily go to jail if it meant that I was dead. I deleted them all. I was scared out of my mind. I just wanted it all to be over and to forget about him. I never really told anybody what had happened, not to the full extent anyway. As the days went by, I would get crazy rambling text messages from him. One moment threatening to hurt me and the next moment telling me that he loved me and that he was sorry. I deleted every single one of them as soon as I had received it. They gradually got less and less frequent and I changed my number not long after and I didn't hear from him again. I got in contact with Anne a while later. Turns out that she has no memory from about 8 p.m. that night, and her boyfriend had an incoherent voice message from her, just babbling and screaming and crying. He picked her up, wandering bewildered around a nearby housing estate. I know we should have gone to the police, and I know I should have told somebody. I know there's a million things I could have done, but I just wanted it to be over. It was the surrealist thing that had ever happened to me, and I still sometimes think back to it and wonder if it really happened because it was just so insane. This was back in the 1990s. I was a single mom and picked up a Saturday night bartending job at a place that was off the highway on a frontage road, not immediately close to anything, but in between some pretty large towns in the affluent suburbs of northern Chicago. In Barrington area, not in Barrington, however. This place was hopping after work hours, but sadly not on Saturday nights, and I would often find myself alone or with only a handful of customers. This particular night was dark, rainy, and a thunderstorm was raging outside. In walks this rugged, handsome man. Windswept blonde hair, crystal blue eyes, nice build, and he sits at the bar. It's just the two of us and I walk over and take his drink order. He orders, I make the drink, and he had put on $2.25 on the bar. I handed the drink and realized that he didn't give me enough money, so I tell him that I need another quarter. The drink was $2.50. Now mind you, we were alone in this good-sized bar. It's a dark night, and thunder and lightning are raging outside. It's not close to any other businesses that I could run to, or where other people might be. And he looks me straight in the eye and calmly says, "I'm Satan. Tell me what you really want. I can give you anything you want. What is it that you really want?" At this point, I really don't know what to say. I'm shaking in my shoes, not sure how I even mustered up a response to him. But I looked back at him and I said, "I want another quarter for your drink, and I want you to stop being so weird and scary." He gave me the quarter, downed his drink, and left. That night later, I had to close up alone, and believe me, I was on edge until the following morning. I didn't work there much longer after that. Seeing Satan once was plenty enough. I also want to add for extra info, he had the most unusual and beautiful gold pendant on. It was an ornate octopus. Now that I read a lot about conspiracies and high strangeness, the octopus symbolizes the Illuminati. This bar was close to, but not in, a very affluent Chicago suburb. I can't help but wonder who he actually was, or worse, what he was actually up to.